Holly Dillon is an executive producer with a deep background in entertainment and activism for visible skin conditions. She has worked on films like Fast and Furious and Guardians of the Galaxy, launched Variety's content studio in addition to her work with leading entertainment publications, and founded the global campaign Get Your Skin Out, which challenges perceptions of skin conditions. Diagnosed with guttate psoriasis at 14, Holly has spent 20 years advocating for change. Through Get Your Skin Out, she has elevated awareness, including producing a campaign that took over Times Square. Holly collaborates with brands and healthcare professionals working at the intersection of media representation and skin conditions to challenge negative stereotypes and demand visibility. Here's a little fun teaser. Holly has an upcoming psoriasis awareness campaign and a podcast that will explore sex, pleasure, and intimacy while living with a skin condition. Thank you guys so much for checking out our conversation with Holly Dillon.
For 19 years, psoriasis has been a part of me and has been my biggest teacher. But now it is my strength. It has brought me a wonderful community and has taught me the power of vulnerability and inviting people in. So here I am, unapologetically myself. I'm proud of my skin and I'm proud of who I am, and you should be too. Never be afraid to get your skin out.
Right. So again, thank you, Holly, for being so willing to share your journey with psoriasis, building your community, your background in production and directing, and how all of these worlds have combined, and all of the amazing projects that you have coming up next. So Thank you for being willing to share, kind of giving us some exclusive. Really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for inviting me to speak to you and learn more about what you and the team are doing. And shout out to Denise for reaching out and setting this up.
Yeah, shout out Destiny. Thank you, Destiny.
Sorry,
we appreciate you. Oh, I didn't even catch it.
Oh, I did. Let me redo. So excited to be here today and speak to you and learn more about what you guys are doing. And yeah, shout out to Destiny for setting this up. Really appreciate it on your side.
Yeah, shout out Destiny. She works so hard. So we appreciate you, girl. Thank you. So let's hop into it. We're talking skin, we're talking confidence, we're talking pushing past the pain points, and learning to embrace the bodies that we have while continuously educating ourselves on that body, right? And not just being like, oh, poor me. No, we're going to do something about it, and we're going to find other people who can support us in that journey. So that is, I feel like, where we totally align. And I'm really excited to learn more about your journey with psoriasis, because we often get, I would say, customers and just like supporters that ask about psoriasis, and we often are talking about eczema and dermatitis, but it will be very educational for us all to learn what your experiences are and kind of what similarities, what differences. And we'll definitely get into some, maybe product recommendations or things that you recommend for people to better maintain like healthy skin and skin prep, so I definitely want to get into that. But first, before we even get into all of that, where are you from? What do you do? Give us a little background.
Who am I? Who is Holly Dillon?
The who am I question. I'm figuring it out every day. What do you want me to say?
Figuring it out every day. I want to give you a good, concise answer, but no, I'm joking. So I was born and raised in London, and my family are Irish. So I have Irish roots. My dad's side is still over there, and then my mum's side immigrated to the UK, London specifically. So I've kind of split my childhood and life between Ireland, London, and I'm actually in LA at the moment. So LA has kind of been my chosen place, often through work. But as we're talking about skin and environment, LA has really given me a lot of space to learn about my body, and as you were mentioning, really kind of do this wider connecting as to what I need. And that wasn't something that I could really get in London. Actually, I got phenomenal care through kind of the health system there, but the kind of wider understanding about connecting the emotional, the physical, foods, and who is Holly at large really came through LA. So my kind of background in terms of where I'm from and where do I hang out is between those three places. I run Get Your Skin Out, which I started 10 years ago, really not knowing what I wanted it to be. And it's still in flex, which I love.
Yes.
But essentially it's become this wonderful kind of community hub that really works to kind of shift and challenge perceptions of visible skin conditions. So as you mentioned, I live with psoriasis, and I have done for almost 20 years. So it's been a big part of my life. Um, and it's actually a type of psoriasis called guttate psoriasis. So for me, that kind of manifests on my skin in what some people would think of as chicken pox, just as a visual reference. So
Okay.
lots of kind of small red dots all over my body. You can probably see it here on my
Yeah,
skin.
you can see the
Um,
variations of the shades of red or pink. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And for me and my skin tone, it does present as red, but that is not the case for everybody. And I know I'm going on a tangent now, but yeah,
No,
I think
please.
starting get your
We're
skin
here.
out.
We trust me, we want to know.
Yeah,
I'm
I love a
yeah.
tangential
Yeah.
chat. Yeah. So I think my world is between those places, creating Get Your Skin Out and also being a producer in advertising for, nearly 20 years. So I'm kind of in this interesting position of pushing Get Your Skin Out and bringing everything that I've kind of honed from content creation and storytelling in big bad advertising world to pushing that for skin conditions. And so that is on paper who I am.
Love it.
I tell it.
I love it. You nailed it. And what brought you to LA? I know you're talking about your career in production and directing. Is that something you always knew you were going to do that was going to lead you to travel around the world? How did you kind of
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, my career in producing and in kind of entertainment at large has always been a constant. I think it's changed in the ways that I've found my enjoyment and stories that I want to be a part of and tell. But it really started being an AD or assistant director in feature films. That was kind of my first big gig that I stayed in for a long time. But speaking of balance and living with a skin condition in life, that part of the industry wasn't something that I could actually sustain, because you're working long ass days for a long amount of time, and some of that is traveling. And that time in my life really kind of coincided when my psoriasis was really peaking and I was getting treatment, and that treatment actually required me to be in the UK, in London specifically. And so throughout the years, I've kind of moved into more producing adverts, producing kind of more branded content, social first content. And then what led me out here to LA was actually a job with Variety, which is, a wonderful entertainment publication, one of the oldies. It's a legacy brand of 117 years. And I came over and I launched their content studio. So that was everything under branded and sponsored content. And really opened up my eyes to a world of print that I'd never really touched before in my career. And so I actually left that job now 2 years ago this summer, I think, in a full-time capacity. I work with them freelance all the time, but that has kind of was my draw and pull to LA. And I feel lucky to be able to kind of exist in many worlds in that space.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And it sounds like you really love the art of storytelling and as well as you know, finding those stories that mean something to you. Has there been a story that you've gotten to work on or a movie that you've gotten to work on that really kind of changed maybe a perspective in your life or your trajectory, career-wise or get your skin out?
I think in general, but given how my career has shaped so far and kind of the different ways that we can tell stories, whether it's me using Get Your Skin Out and on Instagram, whether it's Variety and print and video, or, the big kind of feature films, is just, I think when you're starting your own business and trying to tell a story, whether it's for business or not, if you just want to tell your story or someone's story that's close to you or whatever, something you're moved by, it can feel like a huge barrier to entry of where the hell do I start? And I think what I've learned so far with my career is that you can tell a story in any which way you want, and there's always an outlet for it. And I feel that is a really comforting, it's a really comforting thing to find. Obviously, money is a part of that. We can't ignore all the kind of things that you need to be
Sure.
able to scale it up. But I think,
Yeah.
we are often taught in our world and capitalistic society that you need those things to be able to have a voice. And I think especially through Get Your Skin Out, you know, no one wants to talk about psoriasis. No one really wants to talk about visible skin conditions, you know, eczema, acne, TSW, hyperpigmentation, the list goes on. Yet through a platform like Instagram that cost me no money, and I was just able to share and kind of have this cathartic release, you know, the story was formed, and it was formed with other people who were like me. And I just think that actually zooming out from my career, that's been a beautiful thing to go, you can always tell your story.
You can always tell your story. And having that community, have you come across other, and I don't know if you, do you consider yourself like a psoriasis advocate or a psoriasis survivor, psoriasis you
So
suffer?
many words.
Yeah, because I've never said like I really suffer from seborrheic dermatitis. I
Yeah.
have it. You know what I mean? But like I don't know that I was suffering. I don't know that I'm suffering now. So how do you kind of
Yeah.
I want to
Good
make sure that we're describing
question.
it right.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because I think something, and I see this in the work that you do, you know, is what language are we using? And I
Mhm.
think suffering for me is a word that is a big no-no,
Mhm.
because of the connotations that come with it. And that is not to undermine that you can feel that you are suffering. You can feel that your condition is debilitating, that you know factually that it is affecting you. It's not to take away from that. But I think suffer as a word actually doesn't really leverage us and our skin conditions on a path to having agency and choice. It actually keeps us in a box of going, you're suffering and you're helpless. And that might be my personal opinion. But so as any kind of attributions that I give myself, I never say suffering. I don't really say psoriasis warrior. That's a big one in our community.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that sense
yeah.
you seems a bit off for me.
Yeah,
But I think I say I'm a person that lives with psoriasis, you
yeah.
know, and I think as you've just said there, rightly so, it's a part of me. It doesn't define me. So I'm very conscious in any conversation that I have about how I label myself. And you know, I never set out to start Get Your Skin Out to be an influencer.
Mhm.
Um, so I like to say that I have influence or I have impact by
Yeah.
way of leveraging my own story and then building a community. I mean, that's probably the wrong move because if I felt comfortable being on camera and selling in a cream like this, I'd be a millionaire.
No, I get
Missed
it.
it.
I totally get it. I mean, if I could, I'm really forward facing because I have to be, you know, it's the early stages of really building a foundation that I hope will last beyond me. But I feel very similar in that I could just I'd be okay. You know, I'd be
I'd be okay
okay.
too.
I'd be
Exactly.
okay. But I want to learn more about your psoriasis journey, and I know it'll be educational for us. So exactly what is the type of psoriasis that you have? What differentiates it from the others? If you
Sure.
mind sharing, and how has it impacted your life and day to day and with the treatments that you've had?
Yeah, so I was first diagnosed with psoriasis at the age of 14, and I'm 35 this year. So as I said, a 20-year period of, you know,
Yeah.
going through puberty to kind of teenagehood to then being in my 20s and going through university in my 30s. So I feel like it's been on the ride with me,
Yeah.
which has been fun.
Yeah.
But when I was first diagnosed with it, and actually still to today, my psoriasis has actually been pretty consistent in the type of what it is, and that type is called guttate psoriasis. And so visually, how that presents is kind of smaller dots, almost like chicken pox, like the measles, which I think is a common misconception of people go, holy shit, she's got measles or chicken pox, but just for a visual. And for me, that presents all over my body. So they're probably over my 20-year span of living with it, there hasn't been a place where I haven't had it. And I'd say right now, sitting here speaking to you, probably 70-80% covered. But you know, for me, what's interesting is with my Irish skin, you know, I have a lot of freckles, and so some people don't even notice it, but I'd
Yeah.
say more often than not they do. But I think given that I've already got freckles, but because on my skin tone and being a white woman, you know, my psoriasis presents as quite pink and red in color. But you know, for a person of color with skin of color, that actually is a fact that needs to be debussed and corrected, that red is always the presenting color, which it's not.
Mhm.
So psoriasis, guttate psoriasis has been my journey for 20 years. And, get your skin out really came part of that when I was in my early 20s and I was going to a GP and a dermatologist. This was in London, which is a very normal route to get a diagnosis of GP first, general practitioner, and then if you can, get referred out to a dermatologist. So I was in that route and I'd been doing light treatment and taking a lot of kind of oral medication by way of kind of pharmaceutical companies that help with psoriasis, and nothing was really working beyond a year. And this doctor, this dermatologist just said to me, Holly, you failed.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So imagine in your early 20s when you were told that psoriasis is a lifelong chronic condition, that you failed. And I just remember sitting there and being like, hang on a second, in these 7-minute dermatology appointments, you're telling me that it's my problem, that I failed, and you're not giving me anything else. And at this point in my life, I really, no one else in my family or my kind of extended people have had psoriasis.
Yeah.
So I felt totally alone.
Yeah.
And I just had this insatiable need to connect with more people. And I remember sitting at home at the time with my mum and just being, feeling so helpless and isolated. And although my approach with myself has always been a kind of get your skin out-esque, which is obviously where the name kind of came from, and being proud and being educational and kind of taking a step forward and beating people to the chase before they can freak out and being like, hey, it's psoriasis.
Yeah.
Just still found that there was a well to kind of be filled of needing more information and people like me. And so Get Your Skin Out was really born out of that need of saying, I need to have a release and I need to connect with people. So Get Your Skin Out just came as a name because that, as I said, has always been my approach. Instagram was just on the rise then, and I was finishing up a treatment of light treatment. And I just said, I'm going to take photos.
Yeah.
Going to release it under Get Your Skin Out. And, effectively it became a bit of a really kind of therapeutic, cathartic blog where I was sharing what I was doing, and by nature of sharing and being vulnerable and I guess asking for help and connection, so many people all over the world started sharing their stories. And so 10 years on, Get Your Skin Out really is this online platform that thankfully I've had the chance to meet people, in real life and by way of events or creating content, and still is this kind of hub where people can just exist, right? It's not about fixing you. It's not about selling you a product. It's just going, I'm meeting you where you're at, and here's a space for you. And within that, there's a plethora of information that's driven by community and experience to really garner information and support. So that's kind of how Get Your Skin Out was born.
I love that. And the education that you can provide. I noticed that you all also talk to other professionals in the space, everything from nutrition and how that impacts your body, mental health and stress and how that impacts your body. And I know with eczema, there's a statistic that says that 30% of people with eczema also have either anxiety or depression. And I know with eczema being so tied to inflammation, they kind of trigger each other. So when you're more stressed, you might be more prone to having a flare up. Then you've got a flare up and now you're stressed. And it's like finding a healthy balance of all the different variables that are affecting our bodies internally, externally, with psoriasis. And you mentioned light treatment. Are there other treatments that you've tried or that you would recommend others try if they're experiencing psoriasis?
Yep. Yeah, totally. I think step one for me, no matter what choice you go down, be that the more Western route and medical or more kind of holistic and looking at your wider body, your mental health, your food, all your practices, right, is to get a diagnosis. And I'm sure you feel the same with the eczema community, is like knowing what you have, so you have information by way of, if that comes from a doctor or community or your own research, is step one. So that's what I'd say. If you are in a space to get a diagnosis, do. And then for me, I'd say from about 18 to 21, 22 was when I was really, as I said, in the kind of Western route and kind of pharma world of trying what the dermatologist was suggesting. I went as far as oral systemic medication. None of them really worked for me, if I'm being honest. And for a lot of them, I had a lot of the side effects, which, so let alone kind of seeing how it affected my psoriasis, was actually really tuning into how this was affecting my body. And I think something that's not spoken about is, if you choose to go down that route, it's not as simple as, hey, here's 4 tablets that you have to take a day. Obviously, that is a change in your routine and a change to your body. But, when I was on those oral medications, I was in the hospital every other week getting my liver and my kidney tested, because they have a mass effect on your wider body. So yes, they're immunosuppressants and they're kind of dampening your immune system, but they are also affecting other parts. And for me, it just didn't work. So I chose to come off of them. I did not go as far as biologics, which is injections, which I know a lot of people with psoriasis really find comfort in, which is wonderful. But the thing that always worked for me was light treatment and tar treatment, actually. Tar treatment, yeah. So as it sounds, it smelled like road tar, it looked like road tar. And I would go in 3 times a week and spend an hour, given the extensiveness of the psoriasis on my body. And they'd get this little stick and put it everywhere. I'd sit there then for another hour, and then I'd wash it off, and then I'd go and get light treatment. So, not are you just getting treatment, this is commitment of time. That was 3 hours, 3 times a week. And I did that countless times over. But I think, yeah, light treatment, and it's not something that a lot of people get. And obviously it has associations with skin cancer. So you do have to be careful. But I'd say more often than not, there is an avenue for you if you are interested in the kind of Western route. Make sure you do your research and ask questions. But for someone like me, there's also other information out there of looking at your kind of wider body and self.
Yeah, that's great advice. I know it's so similar in kind of some of your experiences. I never went as far as to try for me, because it was such a small area, with this hairline. I tried the medicated shampoos and steroid creams and stuff like that. It didn't last long for me at all. I just was, and this was when I was like 13. So I was like, ill. I like, it's not doing anything. It's just leaking down my face. It's making it worse. So it's just kind of one of those, I'll just try everything else. And that's literally what I did for a very long time. But it's interesting because I went to an allergist, and the allergist was like, you're making this up, like there's not enough research about these things. And I'm like, there's so many people out there. And
Yeah.
at the time, this was pre-Instagram, so these are like forums. Instagram wasn't really the thing yet. It was still like Twitter around that time.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, but I'm in these forums and they're talking about this is triggering their skin or that. So it's interesting how professionals, like you mentioned, I like that you mentioned with more Western medicine styles versus outside of the West and kind of other options that are out there, how
Yeah.
the medical field and the profession is starting to also embrace other types of therapies that are not just like
Totally.
really strong medicinal, whether it's injections, like you said, or pills or things like that.
Yeah.
Where do you think people can advocate more for themselves, in those situations where
Yeah.
you feel like you know what's going on with your body, you feel like you know that something that they're offering isn't working, but they're saying it's supposed to work. And like, at what point did you decide I'm going to try something else? And did you have to advocate for yourself?
I think I always did. I think my mum specifically was always, from a young age, I was getting acupuncture, so that was always a part of kind of my zeitgeist, and, all these kind of Irish remedies of do this and it will fix this, and so I think that was already in my kind of stream of consciousness in terms of looking at myself in a more holistic way, not just diagnosing by way of what's on my skin.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the breaking point was really when that doctor said you had failed. And I was like, right, this is the system that I am told I have to trust, to be
Yeah.
educated by, to get better. And it is telling me that I have failed. And I just knew inherently within that language that I didn't agree with it, number one. The
Yeah.
medication had failed. I had not. Or the medication and my body didn't work. But, that kind of very binary language, I just was, very much stepping away from. So I think it gave me permission to give myself a chance to learn something else. And that came through Get Your Skin Out, and it came through other people who, when I did start sharing, obviously, as I mentioned, it was sharing light treatment, but within that, I was going, I'm getting acupuncture once a week. And, I've had 100 celiac tests and it all comes back saying I'm fine. But I really noticed that if I eliminate gluten from my diet, that actually my skin improves. Or let's talk about, anyone feel that there's a connection with Candida or Candida, however you
Yeah,
pronounce it,
same.
and
Yeah.
right. And just really kind of, as I said, this like release, and then getting this mass amount of validation of a me too, or hey, have you read this? And I just felt this like phenomenal explosion at that point through Get Your Skin Out, where I was like, I'm not alone. I'm
Right.
also not alone in feeling that this system is really fucking limited in the information that it's giving us. And as we know, is so propelled by pharma.
Yeah.
And that actually I want to be a part of bridging these things together. So, as you mentioned, I think having conversations with healthcare professionals who are not just, the older dermatologist who happens to be a white man, let's face it, and really bringing in wider people who are doing more research and helping to bridge that gap is what I love. So I see Get Your Skin Out as a funnel for kind of personal sharing, as my editorial, if you will, highlighting community and kind of creating within that, but then also speaking to healthcare professionals and hopefully answering community questions or shedding a light on something you might not have even thought about. Like the Western route does not give you information to really go, oh, is psoriasis affecting my mental health? Is it affecting my sex life? It's so rigid. And yeah, so I think that stepping away and giving myself permission really expanded my world.
Yeah. As you can tell, it's something you're very passionate about. Like, of course, you live with it, but you can tell you're passionate about it and about continuing to foster this community. So I know you're planning a new campaign coming up. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think similarly actually to eczema, correct me if I'm wrong, but August is kind of Psoriasis Awareness Month. And then
Oh, mhm.
October 29th, we have
October.
Psoriasis Awareness Day. So
Gotcha.
I kind of see this as like our playtime as community to have conversations like this and meet more people and share knowledge and share stories, but then also to create. And I think where I'm at with Get Your Skin Out is I really want to use my skill set as a producer and the connections that I have and the knowledge to create content so that we are intersecting with other areas. I think our conditions just get solely medicalized all the time, and we need to see it in other spaces. So last year for psoriasis, for October, for Psoriasis Awareness Day, I took over all these out of home digital displays in New York. And, we had people in the middle of fucking Times Square on a massive bus stop size with their psoriasis, proud. And it was a month-long activation. And it just really solidified, I think, from perception point of view, from community being like, fuck yeah, we can be in these spaces.
I'm here, and
Exactly. And I'm going to take up some space. Thank you very much. And then I think the other side of that is advertisers, our wider world, as I said, being like, oh, how did you do that? And it really kind of gave me this insight to be like, that is my sweet spot. So for this year, I'm in the middle of producing a campaign that's going to be coming out of London. And I have about 25 community members that I'm getting to meet and shoot with. And I'll leave it there, but it's going to be a really exciting activation. And then I'm also producing a podcast with a dear friend of mine, which is actually probably going to sound a bit rogue, but I think there's a big link, which is
I was so intrigued. I was intrigued. Doesn't sound
that's
to
what
me
I
at
want.
all.
That's the response. Which is speaking to people who are in very kind of sex positive spaces. I think, there is a lot of shame, as we've discussed, around living with a skin condition. And I am very passionate about pleasure and sex in general. And, for people like us, sometimes that people feel that they cannot be intimate, whether it's with themselves, someone else, partners, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And so having been in these spaces, and I think a lot of queer spaces for me particularly, I've just met so many phenomenal people who have this expansive, very queer in the sense of fluid, not living in this binary way of being able to communicate and understand their bodies and their needs. And I just see so much learning that we can learn from those communities. And I have also learned, and never did I think that, you know, a play party or some kind of sexy scene would be linking to my psoriasis, but here we are. So the essence of the podcast is speaking to, sex experts, intimacy coordinators, dominatrixes, people who are submissive, and really just giving an insight as to how people like us can learn from them, because there's actually a huge link.
Yeah, body positivity is where it's at, okay? And this is what we've got. So, and it can do some amazing things. So let's talk about it.
Exactly. Let's talk about it.
I love that. I wanted to just a little fun moment before we wrap up. Would love for you to finish this sentence. It's okay if it takes a little second to think about.
Okay.
But it's, I wish I knew blank when I was blank.
Oof, I wish I knew blank when I was blank. Let me think about that. I wish I knew, and I guess I wish I practiced more that being vulnerable or leading with vulnerability, in my early 20s, I don't know how to answer it, but it's about vulnerability. Hang on, let me think. What was your setup again? I wish I knew.
I knew when I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish I knew. Let me frame. I wish I knew, I guess when I was in my early 20s, that being vulnerable and leading with vulnerability would open up such joy and expansion for me. And I think I say that very personally as to my journey of understanding myself. I say that through Get Your Skin Out, being vulnerable and asking for help was the root of Get Your Skin Out. But I think it was something that I think, given the type of person that I am, and then producing, I'm always like, pop, 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 pop. And I think I have spent, my late 20s and into my mid 30s, just really focusing on trusting that. So I think I wish I knew that I could trust being vulnerable in those earlier years. But I'm also really glad it's happening now at a space that I can accept it and lean into it. So it's not a regret, but it's a trust it, because you knew it, Holly, then, but you didn't lean on fully. So I'm in.
Leaning in. Yes, absolutely. I love that. That was really nice. Is that the message you would want to share with your community? It sounds like it's the message you already share and you live. So I guess the next question after that would be, what would be the next, I guess, empowering, I don't know, is the way I want to frame this question, but for your community, what's like the next phase for you all? Because I know that you have the podcast coming out, you have the campaign, but what's like the next phase? And I know I have a passion project of my own with Say It With Your Breast, and I have no plan at all. I literally, when I feel like it and I am moved, I do something. That's one of those. I'm just curious, like, what's next for you? Do you have something in mind?
I do. I think I have a few things in mind, but like you, I kind of lead with this, now's the time, and that's why I guess I'm not an influencer, because I'm not posting.
Yeah, I'm not pressed.
I've given over, I think a couple of avenues. I think creating more content. I really believe in that. I believe that whether that's through Get Your Skin Out, or people happy to do it individually, or many other people who are being advocates, is to keep pushing highly produced content. Because the more of that there is, the more visible we are. And I truly believe that is a path in. So to, again, lean into that. And then the other thing for me is I'm seeing huge opportunity for a lot of kind of policy change. That is a longer road, but I think for me, bridging this kind of healthcare gap that we've touched on in this conversation, and looking at holding advertisers and pharmaceutical companies accountable, that is a space that I feel I really want to lean into as well. So I think, to answer your question, those are my next steps, this continuous content creation and infiltrating advertising, the art world, all of these existing spaces, because there is a link. And then really, yeah, moving on policy change.
That's deep. Go ahead, Holly.
Oh, let's go.
Like, don't come for Holly, okay? Do not come.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like, I'm not, I don't have psoriasis, but to know that someone who shares my experiences in life is out there advocating in such a way, I can only imagine, what's next for your community. Like, I can't, them getting behind you in whatever it is that you do next, I think is
I hope so.
inevitable.
Thank you.